Good evening and welcome to the 592nd episode of Travelwitch Radio. I'm Dan Schlossberg, along with my friend, producer, and co-host Roger Noriega, and we are in the 14th season of Travelwitch Radio, the show that lets you enjoy the pleasures of travel from the comfort of your armchair. Every week at this time, we talk to people representing destinations, hotels, airlines, railroads, car rental companies, and others in the world of travel and hospitality, from authors and bloggers to broadcasters and publicists. If it's got anything to do with travel, it's got everything to do with Travel Itch Radio. Our guest today is author, actor, and longtime friend Chris Lucas, who is traveling the country to promote his shows and books. Welcome, Chris, to Travel Itch Radio.
Thank you so much for having me. Nice to see you both.
First of all, Chris, thanks for agreeing to appear on a travel show. We know each other because of your dad and our mutual connection to baseball, but you've been on the road a lot promoting Seeing Home, the book you wrote with him. Tell our viewers about it, please.
It's my dad's autobiography, but I was the co-writer on it, and it tells his amazing story of being struck blind at 12 years old by a baseball, and then turning that around into having over a 65-year Emmy-winning career as a baseball broadcaster and journalist, and pretty much overcoming every obstacle thrown his way as a disabled person. So the backdrop of the book is baseball, but it's really a story for anyone out there who's facing any challenges or difficulties or obstacles and saying, look, if he can do it, you can do it as well.
You also did a book on Walt Disney stemming from your alter ego as an actor who does a terrific one-man show on the life of Walt Disney. How did you get into that?
I've been a Disney fan since childhood. So just like my dad was passionate about baseball and that became his career, I was passionate about Disney, about show business, and that became my career. I like baseball, but not to the extent of my dad, where I wanted to choose it to do something for a living. So I went in the other direction, and Disney just became there's a photo of my boys and I, not in front of the real Mount Everest, but the Disney version of Mount Everest in Florida. But yeah, so and it grew. Well, I was so in love with Disney. I said, how can I make this into something that's going to be something I could turn as part of my career? And I did shows, like you said, about playing Walt Disney, shows about Walt Disney. I've done motivational speeches about him, and it led to a book as well.
You live in New Jersey, but your book tours take you all over the country. Where did you go, and what were your favorite stops?
Both of them, the Top Disney and Seeing Home. I mean, took us pretty much, I'd say, to 2/3 of the states in the United States. And my favorite tour was the one I did with my dad, because just getting to spend time with your dad alone in with a parent in any situation is great. But traveling with your parent and being on a tour, talking about their life and, going to meet people from all over the country who've read a book about him, that was my favorite thing. And the places I love best going with my dad and also with Top Disney are places that are historic places that you read about your whole life, and then finally you're there, and not only are you there, but you're there as an honored guest. So places like the Alamo had us there. We were at Graceland, brought us for some reason out there to talk about my dad and his life. And the one that really touched me with my dad, they brought us to the Helen Keller Museum in Alabama, which is not a lot of people get to visit there because it's in sort of the Muscle Shoals area of Alabama. But it was amazing because for a blind person, that's, Helen Keller is the one you point to all the time, and they brought my dad over to the little water pump that she really did pump in real life, and brought her into her house, and we did a nice little sighting there. So it's places like that that really got me going to historic places that everybody knows. Yeah, there's a picture of me and my son in Death Valley during one of our book tours.
Wave.
Yeah, that was a cool day in Death Valley at 123.
Yeah, I bet. As an author myself, I know the importance of personal appearances, allowing you to meet your public and sign books for them. Do you prefer bookstores or libraries?
That's a really good question, and I'm going to give you a third answer. So I love bookstores and libraries, but when you're there, a lot of times there's pressure in bookstores and libraries to sell books, or they're helping you push books. The ones I love going to are museums, like I just mentioned a few moments ago, because when you go there, it's really not about, it's great if people buy the book, but it's more about linking the story of the book to the museum, to the place, to the venue. And, you can be very creative and come up with reasons. Like I did the clowning museum for the Disney one, and it was, top 10 links between clowns and Walt Disney and things like that. So you can come up with creative speeches and topics that help you as a creative person, a performer, a writer, to be flexible, but also it draws in a crowd that might normally not go to a bookstore or to a library. There's some of them are patrons of that museum, and some are coming to the museum for the first time because they want to hear about that topic. So the museum loves it because they're bringing in people on a day where they might not have a lot of people. And as an author, it's always great to, again, selling books is fine, but it's always great to talk to people and find new fans and get them on your email list and just, create a group that is interested in certain things.
And many of our viewers have seen you on TV or in the movies since you're an accomplished actor. Where have you appeared?
A lot of, I was on soap operas. Well, yeah, that's the photo you're showing is from, I believe, Independence Hall. So that was not a TV appearance, but with a bunch of other performers playing the founding fathers. But I've been on a bunch of soap operas. I was on As the World Turns for a couple of years, One Life to Live here in New York. I was on a show called 30 Rock. I played young Jack Donaghy. So every time they flash back to Alec Baldwin as a younger person, it was me, even though we're only a few years apart, but we had the same eye color, hair color, and same height. And then mostly what I've done is video games. I do a lot of voiceovers for video games. So there's one, Grand Theft Auto. I've been doing it now for 20 years, and my character is now the president of the United States. And it's gone. He started out as a congressman, and now he's moved up to being president. So it's a lot of fun.
Like your dad, you're a great family man who raised two sons after a divorce. How old are your boys now, and how hard was it for you to balance work time and home time?
That's a good question. So my oldest is 22 and my youngest is 20, and work time and family time, whether you're divorced or not, it's difficult in any way. But the thing I really appreciated was learning from my dad, who had to go through that as a single dad. So I got a lot of lessons from him. But the number one lesson that I learned from my father was your children are only going to be that age once, whatever age they are. So even if it costs a little bit more than you expected, travel with them, do things with them, spend time, invest all that time. Because now that my boys are 22 and 20, they like being with dad, but they're off doing their own thing. And if I didn't put in all that time when they were younger and we didn't go on all these amazing trips and see all these places and do all these things, a lot of them Disney related. So I cop to that. I wish we had done more non-Disney stuff, but it's memories that really you create that you can't go back in time and create those memories later on. So that, that's advice for any parent is, do the things now. Oh, and the photo you're showing her, that's another great museum, is the Roger Maris Museum in Fargo, North Dakota, which is all about Roger Maris. So they had me out there to do a thing about my dad there as well.
Oh, that's terrific. We're talking acting, writing, and more with Chris Lucas. And this is Travel Itch Radio with Dan Schlossberg and Roger Noriega in our 14th season, approaching our 600th episode, which we will mark with an hour-long special on June 19th. We're live at 5 New York time every Thursday on LinkedIn, YouTube, WhatsApp, X, Twitter, and Facebook, among others. Roger, you want to take the next set of questions?
You have met many celebrities, including presidents, because of your dad. Would you please tell us about that?
Sure. A lot of that comes from Yankee Stadium, because Yankee Stadium was a magnet for celebrities. So in the basement of Yankee Stadium, there was a dining room that was for the broadcasters, the reporters, the coaches, the managers. The players couldn't go in there, but any celebrity that was visiting Yankee Stadium would come and eat there. And my dad had a table. It was him and Bob Shepard, the voice of the Yankees in the stadium, and Yogi Berra and Phil Rizzuto. That was their table, and every celebrity would sit there. So as a kid, my father being a single father, the Yankees were our babysitter, basically. He would bring us to games, after we got out of school, and we'd be at that table. So it was a who's who of Hollywood legends like Bob Hope and Danny Kaye. All these people love baseball, politicians, presidents. Richard Nixon was one who used to come quite a lot to the stadium. So here, you're a kid, or I was a kid, in 7th grade, 8th grade, beginning high school, and there you're sitting across the table from Richard Nixon. I mean, you can't make that stuff up.
That's absolutely awesome. I understand that all three of us here are major baseball fans. And for you, your love of baseball, I assume, well, of course, thanks to your dad. Dan tells me that he went to 63 consecutive opening days at Yankee Stadium. It's got to be a record.
He did. It is. The Major League Baseball acknowledged my dad the year that it was right before COVID. So COVID ended the streak because there was no opening day. And then my dad got sick after that. So it was right before COVID, and there's a picture of Reggie teaching my dad how to bat. So he broke the record, or he shattered the record of 63 years, and Major League Baseball put out a big press release, and a lot of players, including Derek Jeter, people like that, put it on their social media congratulating him. And, that's the thing. You talk about baseball records, and even casual fans know about Joe DiMaggio's 56 home runs and all the other records that people say will never be broken. But you don't hear as much about the records behind the scenes from broadcasters and reporters and front office people that are there for a long time. And so my dad, he's one of those that you won't hear about it right away in record books, but it's one that people in the media acknowledge, at least here in New York anyway. There's a lot of recognition for him for that.
Were the ball players, politicians, and actors you met easy to approach? And if so, were there any personal favorites or anecdotes you wish to share?
You know what? It's a good question. They were easy to approach just because of where we were. So if you're out in public in a restaurant and there's, a major superstar like an Aaron Judge, there's a picture of my dad with some of the celebrities of the year. So if Aaron Judge or another big ball player is sitting out in a restaurant, they're harder to approach because everybody wants a piece of their time. And it's people that are just the general public. But when you're in Yankee Stadium and you're at that table I mentioned and the celebrities come in, they're more relaxed because they know that nobody's going to fawn over them. It's usually the other people at the table are in that celebrity club. And even a kid like me, I knew that, hey, this is not the place to be bugging them for autographs or pestering them with other stuff. So it was a more relaxed atmosphere, and I had a lot of fun. But as far as my favorite anecdote, it goes back to my dad as well. So Mickey Mantle, I never got to see him play. I'm a little bit too young for that. He retired a few years before I was born. But all I ever heard about as a kid in the 70s was, how great Mickey Mantle was and, this greatest player. And I would see him on sitcoms, and there's a picture of my family at Monument Park. So I would see him on sitcoms. I would see him on all these different things. And it just, in my head, Mickey Mantle, greatest Yankee ever. So one Old Timers Day, I saw him and he was heading out to the field. And, there's a lot of people crowding around trying to get his attention. And I just yelled out, Mickey Mantle, hey, you're my favorite ball player of all time. And he stopped. He turned around. And he's being sort of, a little, I don't want to say snotty, but had a bit of an attitude. He said, how could I be your favorite ball player, kid? You never saw me play and all that. And he started walking away. And I said, well, my dad, he said you were the greatest. And he, he's been around and he turned around. He said, oh, yeah? Who's your dad? And I said, Ed Lucas. And he stopped. He came over to me. He knelt down because I was little at the time, got on his knees and put his hand on my shoulder. He said, kid, a lot of people tell me that I'm their hero. He said, I hear that every day. I'm their hero. He said, I want to tell you, your dad is my hero. And then he got up and walked away. And, I was maybe 7 or 8 years old. So to hear that as a kid at 8 years old, Mickey Mantle telling you that your dad is his hero, that was something that stuck with me for the rest of my life.
Wow. Baseball had one of the greatest owners of all time, George Steinbrenner, and some would say was controversial and often, heck, he was bombastic.
Yeah.
But I also know he paid for, Dan shared this with me. He paid for your father's wedding, the only one to take place at home plate of Yankee Stadium. Right. Dan was there. He has shared that with me. I understand that was a pretty special day, right?
It was 2006. It was my dad's second wedding. Obviously, he had married my mom and then divorced and got remarried. And his wife at the time, she had visual issues as well. And she was a baseball fan. And my dad said, I want to give you the biggest diamond that anybody's ever given a woman. So he called the Yankees and said, I want to have the wedding at home plate. And they said, oh, no one's allowed. Mr. Steinbrenner said, we can't use that field. It's sacred. It's where Lou Gehrig made his speech. And, you just can't use that for anything. And then Mr. Steinbrenner got wind of it and said, no, Ed is family. He's a legend here. He's been here longer than I have. He said, if he wants to get married at home plate. So it was in March before the players were down in spring training. And so it was before the season. And normally Yankee Stadium is, just like every stadium in the winter, just sitting there waiting for baseball to come back. And Mr. Steinbrenner made sure that for that wedding, it looked like opening day. They had the red, white, and blue bunting everywhere. The grounds crew came. He had the security everywhere. And there were a lot of people, probably over 300 people, and a lot of celebrities. Penny Marshall, for some odd reason, she called out of the blue. They wrote about it in Sports Illustrated, and she called my dad and said, I see from Sports Illustrated you're getting married at Yankee Stadium. Can I come? And he had never met her before. And my dad's like, okay, sure, why not come? So it was a great day. But Mr. Steinbrenner, it was because of him. And that's the kind of guy he was. And then at the end of it, weddings are expensive with 300 people. And my dad had the private club in the Yankee Stadium. And at the end of it, Mr. Steinbrenner said, I'm paying for the whole thing. I'm taking care of this entire day. You don't have to pay a dime for it. It's my gift to you, Ed, as a member of the Yankee family. So, and the day was beautiful. It was like 75 degrees in March, and 2 days later it started snowing again. So we had a, all the Yankee spirits and gods, they say, are watching over. They say we're watching over the plate that day.
Oh, heck yeah. You obviously have had several different book writing experiences. In Seeing Home, you and your dad were co-authors, but the Disney book was different, and I assume easier. Would you agree with that?
I would say it was a little harder because, easier with my dad's book. I'd been writing it in my head for 40 years because I knew his story left and right. And I was there for a lot of the events that are in the book. I was a personal witness to a lot of that. So that was a little easier. I just had to figure out how to shape it. With the Disney book, it took 20 years to write. I had to go to the archives. I had to go to different, do a lot of research. I interviewed a lot of Disney stars, and it took 20 years of putting all that together. And it was a reference book. So my dad's book, classified as biography, autobiography, reference books, as Dan knows and other authors know. It's a little more of a challenge because you have to get everything right. And I did. I ran everything by Disney, and we went back and forth over things. So both were labors of love, but that one was a little bit harder.
Wow, that's good to know. I appreciate that. Dan tells me that before your dad passed away, your dad said that there was talk of turning his life into a movie. Do you have any news on that? Is that still going on?
It is still going on. It's a process, like if you see anything about Hollywood, movies sometimes take years and years and years to develop, and this one is no different. I use the analogy, but the movie Rudy, which is considered now a classic, football movie, classic sports movie, and that took 25 years to get from Rudy pitching his story to Hollywood all the way to having it made. And that's true with lots of movies, that it just goes through. So I had a producer once explain it, and it was the best way. He said, making a movie is like one of those combination locks with the numbers that you can have 3 of the 4 numbers. You could have the director in place, the script in place, the actor in place, but if you don't have the financial people in place, it's not going to work. Or you can have the financial people ready to pay for it. You could have a script, but if you don't have an actor and director, so it's got to all line up the right way, and then you make the movie. So we have 3 of the 4 tumblers now. We're just waiting for the last one to click in. So it's a process, but I'm a person of faith, and I firmly believe that the movie will be out when it's ready to be out. When there's, when that's the movie that's going to get all the attention and the Oscars and get all the awards and all. That's the year it's going to come out, when it's time.
That is great news. We're talking acting, writing, and more with Chris Lucas.
Chris, your dad was an amazing guy, especially since he never considered blindness a handicap. He always said it was just a nuisance. And he had the best sense of humor. At his wedding, you turned tears into laughter when you told his favorite joke. Would you mind sharing with Travel Itch viewers?
I would love to. Yeah, this was indeed my father's joke. So I'll try to make it as concise as I can. There are 2 guys who are baseball fans their entire lives, grow up as kids together in the neighborhood, baseball fans, become adults, and all they do is talk baseball, watch baseball games. In the off season, they're reading about, they're playing fantasy baseball. They just love the game so much. And one day they get to talking, and they said, I wonder if there's baseball up in heaven. So their names are Jimmy and George. And George says, do you think there's baseball up there? And Jimmy says, well, let's make a pact that whichever one of us goes first, whichever one's not first, we're going to try to come back past the great beyond and let the other one know whether or not there's baseball in heaven, whether God loves baseball. So years and years pass, and then George dies, and Jimmy is sad that he's lost his longtime friend, and he goes to the funeral and the wake. And that night, he's in bed, just about to fall asleep, and he hears, Jimmy, Jimmy, and he looks up, and there's George floating above the bed. And Jimmy's scared at first, but George says, oh, don't worry. He said, I've done it. I've come back from the great beyond to answer the question we posed. Does God love baseball? Is there baseball in heaven? And Jimmy says, well, is there? He said, well, I've got good news and I've got bad news. He said, well, tell me, what's the good news? He said, well, does God love baseball? Wow, does he love baseball? The minute you get up there, heaven has got the biggest baseball stadium you've ever seen, the greenest grass, the smell of Cracker Jacks and hot dogs, like everything that we love, it's up there. And all the great players of all time, they're up there playing the game, and you get to go in the stadium and see all this. And he said, the best part is, if you've been fans like we've been our entire lives, they pencil you in. They put you in the game. And he said, last night I was out there in center field, and I had Babe Ruth on one side, I had Hank Aaron on the other. He said Todd Cobb was out there playing. Cy Young was pitching. It was the greatest experience ever. And Jimmy says, well, that all sounds terrific. He said, but you said bad news as well. What was the bad news? He said, oh, right, you're scheduled to pitch next Friday. That was my dad's favorite joke.
That's good. I like that one.
Yeah. His sense of humor is what got my dad through a lot in life, and it's something I picked up as well as a performer, that, you know, if you can make people smile through adversity, through anything, that's one of the most valuable tools in the world to have.
Chris, you and I both accompanied your dad as a cited escort at baseball games, including All-Star Playoff and World Series games. And I know Reggie Jackson took him into the outfield to show him how to grip a bat, for example. You have so many memories. It must be hard to pick one or two. But would you tell us who your favorite stars were, not because of their performance, but because of the way they treated you and your dad?
You know, I'd say out of all the players, and it is literally throughout the decades, thousands of players, the two that really, in my heart and mind, and you showing Reggie, who's one of the greats as well, to my dad, but really I would have to say more than anything else, Phil Rizzuto and Yogi Berra, who were superstars in their own right. I mean, American legends, not just baseball people, but they pop culture. And both of them, it was like they were little Italian uncles that were in the neighborhood. They would come over the house for coffee. We'd go to their house. We'd hang out. And I never once felt like, oh, these are people that you should be put on a pedestal. They were just so down to earth, so nice from the very beginning. Their wives, their family, those are the kind of people I gravitated to in baseball and the celebrity world. The people that don't forget where they came from and realize that, hey, it's a job. It's, yes, we're famous. Yes, we get all the adulation. But when it comes down to it, we're just ordinary people like anyone else trying to raise a family and so Yogi Berra and Phil Rizzuto were two of my dad's. Phil Rizzuto especially was my dad's best friend his entire life from when my dad went blind at 12. So those are the two that if anybody else, that if I met no one else in baseball but them, I would have been very happy.
Chris, you have a great voice and a great knowledge of baseball. Did you ever want to become a baseball broadcaster?
Baseball broadcasting should be left to people who really know the game inside and out. Like, Dan, you'd be a great baseball broadcaster because you have written so many books and you know the game inside out. I am more a Disney guy, a show business guy. So if you said to me, hey, would you like to be the host of Entertainment Tonight? I'd jump at that right away. But if you said, would you like to, host on ESPN a baseball show, I could fake my way through it. But people would figure it out immediately that I'm not, I don't want to say as passionate, because I like baseball. I love baseball, but not to the level that my dad did. So that's, everybody should find the one thing, and sometimes multiple things, that really drives them and gets them really excited. And for me, it's not baseball. So yeah, I could, like I said, fake my way through the game, but broadcasting, I'll stick to other parts of the broadcasting field.
You use your voice a lot as an actor and as a tour guide in New York City. What kind of tours do you do, and how do people sign up for them?
Thank you for asking. So the tour guide thing is sort of a level of performance. It's like being on stage. You get a group of people. It can be small as 2 or 3 people. It can be buses full of 50 to 60 people. And I'm up there, and it's like any performer, you have a crowd in front of you. So I give tours. Most of what I do is the general tour of New York City, just taking people around all the different boroughs and the areas and the historical sites. But I'll get calls for baseball tours. I'll get calls for holiday lights tours. I'll get calls I had one a couple of weeks ago for a Bob Dylan tour, I guess, because of the new movie, that they wanted me to bring them around and show them different places. And one of my favorite things I did there, I brought them to Bob Dylan's apartment in Greenwich Village, which looks exactly like it did in the photo album covers and everything. And I told the story, which is a true story. Bob Dylan, I think it was 1969, was sitting on his front steps smoking a marijuana cigarette and had a few in his pocket, and they arrested him for that. So I tell people the story, and then I say, look right next door to Bob Dylan's apartment, and it's now a dispensary because that's legal in New York City. So if they could have, looked ahead 50 years, they would have seen how Greenwich Village has stayed the same, but it's changed as well. So that's what I love about doing tours about New York City. It's, it's got so many great stories and so many great places. But if somebody was interested, and thank you for asking that, my website is ChristopherPatrickLucas.com, or it's ChristopherPatrickLucas@gmail.com, because in the union there's already a Chris Lucas in acting, so I had to take the middle name, Christopher Patrick Lucas.
Chris, what advice would you give to viewers who would like to become actors. Isn't it a lot harder to act than it is to write?
It is. Well, it's if you had asked me that question 40 years ago, both were harder to get into because you had to really convince someone to publish your stuff or convince it. Now, for today's generation, even for people our age, you can just put your stuff out there, and you could, like you're doing right now, have a podcast. You could create your own content. You just get things out there, and you put enough of it. Congratulations on almost 600 shows. You put enough of it out there, and people are going to start to pay attention and start to bring you in for other things as well, or talk to you about other things, or see you as an expert. So as far as actors, what I always say to young actors, if you want to do it for a living, it's not an easy profession. It's you shouldn't want to be famous. You should just want to be a working actor. Start there. Try to keep yourself employed. But also, if you can see yourself doing anything else, and this applies to any field, then go do that, because acting is not for the faint of heart. There's a lot of rejection. There's a lot of hard work that nobody ever sees, of marketing and creating all these things. So for the people who really, really love it, stick to it. Don't give up. Be persistent. And for the ones who are kind of half-hearted or just want to be superstars, that it's not for you then, because there's so many other people out there that are doing the same thing, that have a lot more dedication to it than you.
You were working on Seeing Home. Was it hard to separate the baseball portion from the real life portion? I know your dad raised you and your brother Eddie from the ages of 2 and 4, and then years later became the first blind father to win custody from a sighted wife. Was it hard to go through that?
It is. It's like anything. When you're telling a deeply personal story, it's fun to tell all the fun stuff like we've been doing here. But then when you have to get into the serious parts of your life, or the parts of your life that are wounded you a little bit, and you have to rip open, not just for me, for my dad as well. He had to relive the whole divorce and the reasons and everything else. So it is a little harder to get into that, but it's necessary. When you're telling a story, if you don't tell the full story, then later on someone's going to come back and say, hey, how come you didn't talk about this in the book? So it's one of the things I loved about Seeing Home is baseball is the backdrop, but it's a story, like I said before, that touches a lot of people, because it touches on areas that a lot of people have gone through. Many people have relationship issues, or have gone through divorce, have been children of divorce. So we get more comments about that sometimes than we do about the baseball part.
We're talking acting, writing, and more with Chris Lucas. Roger?
Your dad was remarkable because he lost his sight at age 12 and announced he would never stand on the street corner with a cup and a cane. And then he became the first blind student to graduate from Seton Hall University. Wow, that is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, and at the time, Seton Hall was all male school, and my dad had a seeing eye dog, was Kay, was a female dog. So she's credited. There's a photo of her in the library as the first female graduate of Seton Hall. They gave her a little cap and gown and everything for the graduation, because they called her the queen of the campus, his female dog. So he had a lot of fun at Seton Hall, and it was one of those things. That was Phil Rizzuto, again, going back to him, that he said to my dad, hey, don't be depressed. Get yourself a degree, go out there, and I won't get you a job, but I'll try to open as many doors as he can. And he was true to his word.
Dan always called your dad the blind AAA. So would you please explain to our viewers how your dad was able to give driving directions such as turn left at the next corner? How did he know this stuff?
I wish I knew. I don't even know how he never revealed the secret, but he was like, GPS before there was GPS, that he had, I guess, a gyroscope in his head. But my dad had the advantage that he didn't go blind until he was 12. So as a kid, he had seen maps. He kind of understood, he could see streets. It's a little different than if you're born blind and you have no visual identity. But his memory, even to his dying day, he was sharp as a tack. And if he went someplace once, he could map it out in his head and then give others directions to get where they needed to go. So people were baffled. People that at first didn't know he was blind were then shocked to find out he was blind after they had taken directions to get somewhere from him. Really complicated. So, I wish I had that skill. I'm pretty good with direction, but if you ask me Disney parks, I have all that mapped out in my head. But as far as going different places, I have to rely on my phone to get me there.
I understand that for years your dad had guide dogs from the Seeing Eye in Morristown, but when he married Allison years later, he managed without them. Was that hard for him?
Well, a lot of it was because my brother and I were older and we were driving, so we became the dogs. So, that's the truth. And when we were younger, obviously we couldn't take him places, we couldn't get around. He would go with us occasionally holding his hand, but he had 4 dogs in his lifetime, and the last one was Tommy, and Tommy lasted until the mid 90s or so, and then got old. And when your dog gets old, you can either retire it back to the seeing eye or just let the dog live out its life in the house. So my dad let Tommy live out the life in the house, was no longer a guide dog. And at that point, like I said, my brother, I, and all of his friends like Dan and other people became the dogs. And it was a lot easier at that point to get around. Thanks to the Americans with Disabilities Act and things like that, a lot of places had opened up where you could easily access and get around, even for blind people. And Braille was written everywhere at that point. So he didn't need the dog so much later on in life.
Would you tell us what happened at Phil Rizzuto Day at Yankee Stadium? Because I understand that you're laughing. I understand your dad exceeded his allotted time, unable to see the producer flashing him signals. Would you tell us about that?
He did indeed. It wasn't his fault. So it was 1985, August of 85. It was sold out Yankee Stadium. And they asked my dad, they said, "You're Phil Rizzuto's best friend. Will you do a speech, honoring Phil and talking about your relationship?" And my dad said, "Okay, how long do I have?" And they said, "You have 8 minutes of airtime, and then we're going to cut to a commercial." And so he prepared, and I helped him. I was younger, but I helped him prepare that 8 minutes, and he drilled it and got 8 minutes. In fact, he came in, I think, at like 7 minutes and 30 seconds. Fantastic. Then he gets in Yankee Stadium, full Yankee Stadium. He starts talking. He says, "Ladies and gentlemen," and then all of a sudden, "Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, ladies," the echo, and it threw him off like it does with a lot of national anthem singers, and he wasn't prepared. So he was pausing to let the sound catch up with what he was saying, and that 7-minute, 30-second speech turned into like 15 minutes. And it was live on WPIX, and they're frantically wrap it up, waving at him, doing everything they could to get his attention, not realizing, they should have, but they didn't. That he's fine. So finally, one of the former players just kind of leaned over and tapped him on the shoulder and whispered. And you see that live on camera. You watch the video of someone whispering in his ear. My dad wraps it up really. "Okay, I guess I'm done. Thank you very much."
For more than 25 years, your dad organized and hosted an annual charity golf tournament to raise money for the sightless and handicapped people. Isn't it still going on now, run by the Ed Lucas Foundation?
It is, yeah. So a few years before he died, my dad started the Ed Lucas Foundation to help disabled people, and not just blind people, but anyone going through any disabilities. And so their premier event is that golf tournament that started by Phil Rizzuto. And then later on, after Phil Rizzuto died, Gene Michael took it over. And now after Gene Michael passed away, it's David Cohn. And it's been great because having 3 guys like that, my dad, knew a lot of people, but having an actual player or someone like Gene Michael who made the careers of all these people, made it easier to get celebrities to come to the event or get attention to it. So we've been blessed that it's been running for more than 25 years now, and they've done really well with it.
Thank you. I think Dan is dying to ask you a question about the 1991 All-Star Game.
Oh, yeah. I'll never forget being in the National League clubhouse in Toronto with your dad. We were talking to Craig Biggio of the Houston Astros, and they made the rest of the media leave, but because your dad was sightless, they figured, what harm could he do? He's not going to steal anything. So I said to Ed,
"Wow,
let's stay right here," because I just saw President Bush enter the clubhouse from the far end. And I figured because Biggio played for a Texas team, he was going to come right over to where we were. And that's exactly what happened. So Ed always carried some brand new baseballs with him. And he said, "Do you have a pen? Do you have a pen?" The only pen I had was a green Sharpie. So Bush comes over to us and he says, "Mr. President, would you mind signing this ball?" It's the only baseball signed by George Bush in a green Sharpie.
Yeah, my dad had a great collection of baseballs, and he prized that green Sharpie ball because, again, it's unique, and he wanted to get as many presidents as he could. So you're talking about George Bush Sr., George H.W. Bush.
Yes.
The son, George W. Bush, ran the Texas Rangers, and my dad got to know him through the Texas Rangers. So when he became president, my dad said to him one day, "Hey, I'm collecting all these presidential balls. Would you sign one?" And he said to my father, "Do you have one from Millard Fillmore?" And my father said, "Well, no, I don't. I have reasons." He's like, "Hang on." And he signed the baseball, Millard Fillmore, and handed it to my father. And I was with him, and I was like, "Oh, look at that. He's got it." And then he signed one, with his real name. But that was the kind of, the people, my dad got to know 7 U.S. presidents personally through his career. Again, this amazing Forrest Gump type of life. But I'd say, George W. Bush was one of his favorites, thanks to the baseball connection.
People often ask me about my favorite cities on the road, not to mention favorite airlines, hotels, and restaurants. What do you like or dislike, Chris?
I'm a city kid, so New York City is in my heart, and I'm there all the time in the city. So as much as I love visiting rural areas and visiting other countries, I'm attracted. So places like Los Angeles, the LA area, and again, there's a lot of Disney involved in that too. But just being out there, it's dear to my heart. Being to Chicago, any of those big cities around the country, those. A lot of people don't like cities, but I think a city, you can go there multiple times and still not see everything there. When sometimes you're in a small place and it's nice and you visit for a week and you cover everything there is to cover. But cities are places you can every single time. You can go on a food tour, you can go on a history tour, you can go on that, and you'll find something new every time. So that's what I love, is cities, visiting those.
Roger?
How do our viewers learn more about you, your tours, and your books?
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So my website is ChristopherPatrickLucas.com. You can go there, and thank you. Scrolling at the bottom, and there's a reel of my acting stuff on there, and there's my resume. It's mostly geared towards acting, but there's also a contact page, and my email is there. Or you can email directly, ChristopherPatrickLucas@gmail.com.
Our guest. Oh, is there anything that we have not asked you that you want to go ahead and share with us?
Boy, I mean, you guys, it was like 60 minutes. You really covered, or like a Barbara Walters interview. I mean, I didn't cry or anything, but you covered pretty much everything. So thank you. Yeah, and I'm glad you got to the travel questions too, because I'm being blessed to do book tours, and with all the Disney is a lot of traveling. And I will say, and this goes to Disney, for people who are Disney fans, if you're looking for a place to go that's not one of the Disney parks, Marceline, Missouri is where Walt grew up. And they have the Walt Disney Museum there. That's one place. San Francisco has a Walt Disney Museum. And then in Los Angeles, Griffith Park, once a month on a Sunday, they have the barn that Walt built himself. It's the only free Disney-related exhibit in the world. You can go and see everything that Walt created with his own hands. So there's a lot of stuff to see that aren't the Disney parks in the United States.
Chris, for someone who is not from Los Angeles, very few people know that, and that's really cool. I'm glad you shared that.
They've had me out. I know because of book signings out there, but even when I'm not doing a book signing, I just love. And if you're a Disney fan, a lot of the Disney legends, including actors, they go there on those Sundays to meet the fans. So it's a place where you get to meet celebrities as well.
It is cool. It's a bit of a secret, but now it's out.
Yeah, sorry, Disney folks.
No, not at all. It's just been a privileged secret, I suppose. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest today has been actor and author Chris Lucas. Thank you, Chris, for visiting with us on Travelage Radio.
Well, thank you both for having me. It's a great honor. I appreciate it. And congratulations again on almost 600 shows.
Yeah, thank you. June 19th, our special. Since baseball season's in full swing, this is the perfect time to share the excitement with my latest baseball biography, Home Run King, The Remarkable Record of Hank Aaron, featuring a foreword by Dusty Baker. This 265-page hardcover explores Aaron's contributions as a home run hitter on and off the field, as an athlete and as an advocate for civil rights. That's Home Run King, The Remarkable Record of Hank Aaron. Get it today on Amazon.com. And that's it for this edition of Travel Itch Radio. This is your host and writer, Dan Schlossberg, along with producer and co-host Roger Noriega, saying thank you for your time this time. Until next time, join us next week when we'll talk to Abigail Phillips of the Massachusetts Office of Travel and Tourism about their upcoming party for the 50th anniversary of Jaws. Hope to see you then. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Good evening and stay safe. And I'll see if I can get the closing music to play. I'm working on it. There we go.